it's interesting to do this reading thing and then to be with a crowd that's so loving back.
Yeah.
Because you're like, I don't want to end this yeah, the ego gets stroked a little bit, but it becomes more than that. It becomes this beautiful exchange where I'm like, I could do this for the next 10 hours. I don't know if they would do it, but I could do it.
But you never know, you know what I mean? Like, this is a pretty receptive house right now.
Yeah, we're good, though.
Yeah, we're good.
We're good.
Yeah.
After a while, I'm like, ew, how many poems suck?
No.
I mean, like, it's not true, but like after,
it's the feeling, yeah.
Do you ever feel like that?
I sometimes feel like, oh my God, this bitch is whining again. Like, to myself, I'm like, why am I whining again? I'm always so upset, you know, like. But there's so much celebration in your own voice. But there are some moments where I'll be hearing my own work at a length. And I'm just like, wow, this shorty is really upset right now. She's pissed.
I'm doing something tomorrow, and they asked me to pull some love poems.
Yeah.
Because it's going to be something for Valentine's Day. And then I'm like, I don't think I write the kind of love poems you want. Like, everything I write is about love, but, like, it's fucked up.
Yeah. But also, I'd be hard-pressed, and maybe this is a challenge. Maybe this is just for us to find, like, a love poem that is on point, like, overwhelmingly joyful, and not corny as fuck. Like, can we find it? I'm sure it exists, but that's hard, like, in general.
I mean, I think I have one.
Okay. I don't have any.
No, because in the end, I have the habit of, like, happy, and then it gets fucked up. And then everybody's like up here. Well, I do that right now. Like, everybody's up here, and then they're like, oh shit.
But I love that shit. I love that. Like, oh word, and oh my God, you know. And then you just fall on the ground.
Yeah, the turn.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, I always try to do the turn the other way, and it never works.
Look, maybe these are the challenges for 2020. Maybe this is the next move.
Yeah. What are your challenges for your writing in 2020? Sorry, I'm interviewing you instead of letting them ask us. But
no, I mean, look, I'm into it. Fuck it.
Yeah.
I think my challenges for 2020 writing is like to view men and mask bodies in ways that are not just me being annoyed. You know, like, not because they need me to do that, but just for my own edification. Like, I feel like whenever I write plays or screenplays or whatever, I write these men characters, and the feedback I've gotten is like, oh, but that nigga's stupid. Like, they just always dumb or just like plottering around or like
because
maniacal. And I feel like I'm telling the truth.
Yeah.
But you know, I think I'd like to challenge myself to be like, is there anything positive I can write about this?
What if you wrote a femme character and last minute you switched it to a masculine character?
This I will try.
Okay, bye. We're going to go right now. Okay, so I guess now it's when we open it up for y'all. And who has the microphone? Oh, over there. So, and this is my little spiel. Whenever we have a Q&A, this is your time. Take advantage of it. Because later when we're signing books, you want to ask us questions. And there's like 20 people behind you and there's no time for that. And then it gets awkward. So let's not be awkward and talk to me, please. Or else we're going to stare at each other for like 20 minutes. On this side. Over here.
Hello.
You gotta make out with the microphone.
Hello. I think it's is it working?
I can hear you.
All right. Thank you so much for being here. Such a big fan. Hello. It's working now. Yeah. Okay. Cool. I think something that I've been thinking a lot about, just cause like I graduated college last year. I'm 23, working full time, and I just like struggle with like imposter syndrome. And so I guess if you were to talk to your like 23-year-old self, like what would be the message that you have for your 23-year-old self, and like what is your advice when it comes to like imposter syndrome, or just
Where were you when you were 23, fresh out of school?
When I was 23, I had graduated from college about 2 years before, and I was in New York, and I was doing a lot of teaching, which I actually really don't enjoy to do. There's no love in my heart for it. And so I was trying to like really make all the writing happen and I wasn't doing enough to balance my own personal life with my work life. It was just all work life. And I totally feel you on the imposter syndrome tip of just like, am I allowed to be in these rooms? Am I allowed to be in the rooms I dream of? Am I allowed to like make the rooms I dream of? And I would tell me like, you have to. Like it's actually your job to do the things that feel completely not for you, because there are so many institutionalized reasons that make you feel that way that aren't even something that came organically from you. You know, it's like so much racism, so much like exploitative shit that like I would just tell myself like, start making the room you want to be in, and then you'll be in the room.
That's beautiful. Also, another thing too, you went to college, you have a degree. I would love for somebody to tell me after I sat my ass through 4 years of school to be like, you can't be in this room, or to like let myself feel that. Like the torture, I didn't finish high school and I didn't go to college, but I see my friends go through all that labor, and like everything you have, you earned fair and square. And we tell ourselves all these things because of the same things that he said, that like all these other things outside of our own control try to keep us out. But it's so what? So what if you show up somewhere and you feel like you shouldn't be there? You're still there, and eventually you're gonna believe you're supposed to be there. Like I remember when I first started reading, like doing more readings than just the local open mics and stuff, and I would be terrified of things, but I still said yes, and I would still show up, and I would feel uncomfortable and awkward and all of that, but I sat through it and I went through it. And now let anybody try to tell me I don't belong in a certain space. You know, you just gotta show up and not flinch. Although you're scared inside, don't flinch, because then people will believe you that you're supposed to be there. And that imposter syndrome, you just gotta talk your way through it, and it never really goes away. I'm sorry, but like, do you still experience it
every fucking day? Yeah, absolutely. Because I think so much of, especially this like Western construct, and then to be like a not man person of color, you know, every room is going to be like, bitch, why you here? And every room I walk in is like, oh, you're black, you're young, you're this, you're get out, you know. And then it's your job to be like, not only am I going to stay, I'm going to take your job, and I'm going to make more jobs for more people who look like me. Like it's our time.
Like whenever everywhere, right? Gentrification is a bitch. But whenever I end up unknowingly in a gentrified space, or I'm in a white space, I don't worry about that, because I know that where I show up, y'all show up. And this is how we create space. This is how we show institutions like Strand and Poets House and other places that people of color show up in numbers, people of color show up for what they support in, and they want to see themselves reflected. So who am I to be like, I'm not supposed to be there, if somebody if my publisher made it possible for me to be here, and they were like, no, Daniel, like, I don't think I'm ready for New York. No, because y'all were ready to come to a night where you see yourselves, right? So yeah. I know you've been ready. Because we've been talking about it. But yeah. Next question? Okay, then ready.
Could we pass it down? Thank you. So what's up? Thank you for being here. Abuelita, manda saludos. She loves your poetry.
So let me tell a brief story. What's your name again, my love?
Nico.
Nico sent me a picture when I had just released Corazon 2 years ago, when I started this whole book journey, of his grandmother holding a copy of Corazon. And her hands looked like my grandmother's hands. So like I was like bawling in the bathroom for like 15 minutes. But ever since then, he's shared every book with his grandmother. And so I have this relationship with this abuela I've never met. But I'm so happy.
That's so beautiful.
Yeah.
So she says hello. She wishes she could be here, but you know, she out here making casamiento. So my question for the both of you, right, is something I think that is so beautifully done, aside from every poem, is like how full everybody you talk about is, but especially your father. And I think that, like, I know personally it makes me reflect about the relationships I have both with my parents, but other ancestors, like people who are no longer with us. And sometimes I make them really one-dimensional, right? Like either I'm like really angry, or either I like love them without being able to have them here. And so, and for both of y'all, like, how do y'all like really engage with this process of like respecting the fullness of a person who may not be here anymore, and who you are navigating all these emotions with, especially if like, you know, like they're tied to you by family and stuff. So yeah, because I think the way like you write about your father is just like, it's full. It never feels like incomplete.
Thank you. It took me a while to get there. Before my dad passed away, when he was still alive, like a lot of my writing has revolved around my father, because that's why I went to writing, because I was trying to make sense of growing up in a home with an alcoholic father and abuse and all these things. So when I first started writing about him and I was a kid, it was about like, my dad's a drunk and he's like hurting me, right? But he's hurting me because I love him. So that means there's parts of him that I love. So I always understood that my dad was multiple people, that my dad had dimension, like different things to him, right? And I never could I could never like pin it down. And one of my teachers once told me, she's like, a poem is never supposed to tell the whole story. That's what books are for. That's what other things are for. So in this poem, what is it that you're going to tell? And so once I realized that I was allowed to tell different relationships or different moments with my dad in different poems, I found a whole different freedom in telling the story of that and of my mom and of my other family members, where I could go to a poem really upset with my mom because she enabled my dad for whatever time, but then I could also write a poem about how beautiful their love was. And those two are true, right? And those two exist. But I stopped trying to tell the whole when I stopped trying to tell the whole story got told. I don't know if that makes sense. Yeah.
No, I think that totally makes sense. Yeah. And I think that like, you know, for so long as like a young writer, I remember my dad would always say to me, like, in a joking tone, but one of those jokes that just is serious, you know, as they do, is that don't write about the family. Just don't write about the family. And I'd be like, nigga, what you afraid of? Like, it's my family, you know? Like, I, you know, am here as a product of this lineage, all the things we inherit from it. And I think that, like, to Yesika's point, like, everything is that dialectic. Is like, you know, my father can do shit that completely undermines my being here. My father can also make me chai tea from scratch the perfect way that I like it, like nobody else can. And it's just like, I think the challenge that I'm interested in is finding those like imagistic human moments that make me want to fall in love with this person. That is the reason just because they're my biological family doesn't mean I have to love them, but makes me want to love them because I want to live a life that is loving, you know, boundaried but loving. And like, I think it makes it so much more complicated when you're sitting down to like braid into your anger those kind of images. And you could be mad as fuck and he's still making you this tea, like for instance, you know? And like, I think that's what's beautiful about being people in these bodies with these minds, you know, is that like it's infinitely contradictory. And I think like seeking that out is what made it like more fun for me anyway, of just like, because anytime I'd sit down to write like, I'm mad at my sister, I would show it to my auntie and she'd be like, this isn't a great poem, kid, you know? And it was so sweet, very sweetly, like I'd be like 18, just like, rah! And it's like, you know, there's other stuff going on. And I think like, just as there's always other stuff going on with us. And yeah, it was a kind of long way of saying it.
Yeah. No problem.
Thank you. I'm going to get up. Sort of to piggyback off of Nico's question. Sorry, I'm a little sick. I'm getting over it. One of the things that I've connected so much with your poems is your relationship with your dad. Sorry, I'm getting emotional.
It's all good.
Because I love him so much. But things about him from his past have come forward that have changed the way that I view him. Him hurting people that I also love. And I think maybe that's something that in a lot of our culture we have to deal with. The patriarchy culture and maybe our fathers getting away with things and the women having to look the other way. So I just wanted to ask you personally, and you as well, how have you made peace with both those sides of your dad and still respect his memory, but also dealing with those things.
Yeah, so when my father passed away, I found myself in El Salvador a year later for his we do this thing in El Salvador called a novena. For 9 days you pray and then you party. I don't know, it's weird. And it's so weird. Like you pray the rosary and then you eat tamales, and that's what it is. But so I was there for that, and everybody decided that it was time to tell me how shitty my dad was, right? And like, because it's my mom's family. And my dad was never good enough for this. It's a whole other, I'll write about that one day. But Tesoro is all based around the men that you, like, looking at the men that you love and realizing they're not shit, right? And there's a line in Tesoro, to quote myself, sorry, but it says, I said, I know my dad, I loved my dad, I know my dad's love, I lived it. I know my dad's love, I survived it. And so the fact that those two are true, like my father loved me so much, he taught me and gave me some of the things that what I'm making a living with now, you know, like what gives me the most joy. But he also gave me scars that I'm gonna have, that I'm working to heal forever. But he was also a very scarred man whose father gave him, you know what I mean? So like understanding that some of these things we have no control over, and he had no control. I lived my life trying to figure out my dad. I was just like, why are you like this? Why are you like this? 2 weeks before he died, I found out that my grandfather had taken his own life, and my father was the one that found him at 9 years old. And so then I was just like, if I had known this while my dad was alive, it would have put everything into perspective, and I would have had, you know, I would have, whatever you think you would have done, right? But that showed me that, like, there's so much else at play that we can't, you know, our parents live entire lives before we show up. And then they try to make the best of with what they have with us. And sometimes it fucks us up. And other times, I don't know, I haven't met people that it turns out 100% good. And if you're out there, please let me know so I could have hope. But coming to terms with that, and also coming to terms that it's not my job to fix anybody other than myself, right? And then what is fixing yourself, you know? But it's not my job to go back and like mend like I saw like online that when someone heals themselves, they heal 7 generations forward, and they undo the work of 7 generations back. And so if we stop trying to redo our parents' stories and focus on our own, look at all of that healing that causes, that's 14 generations that you have the power to change, to shift, to give a different perspective in. And so I hold that truth, whereas like my father wasn't a bad man. He was somebody who had an addiction that tried to love me as best as he could, and everybody else around him, and it didn't really show up that way a lot. But now he's dead, so I could either be mad, and I'm allowed to be mad, or I could just accept that my dad was sometimes a shitty person and sometimes an amazing person, and that's what it is. And I say it very matter-of-factly, but it's a fact, right? And we can't change that ever. And so it becomes a lot more, a lot less burdensome once you just accept it as what it's the truth.
No, totally. And I think like the word I love using is like, oh, this is just information. Like this is just more information about a person I've known for a fragment of their life, right? Like it's information. And I think it's so necessary to have the emotional reaction to that information. Like, oh my God, this information is making me feel all these things about this person who I was used to feeling only certain things about, only certain joyful things about. But I think when it boils down to like, this is what it is. He was this and he was that and he was this and he was that. Like, you know, I think that's the road to making peace with it. And I think like truly, couple things, right? Like I love Solange's thing. I got a lot to be mad about. You can have a lot to be mad about, you know, like get it. You get into all that. But I think more than anything, to Yesika's point, is like he gets to be who you need him to be. It's your dad. No one can take away the joy of who he was. No one can take away the beauty, even though there is so much ugly, you know. No, the two things must live at once, and that's what's hard. And then you get to do you, like all that is you, you know, like just by being, you're just a product of, right? And then you get to be your whole thing, and he gets to be his whole thing. That's how I make peace with that.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
that no one can change what he was for you.
Yeah.
Tell poems with your answers. Where are we at?
We got time for a couple of more questions. I'm going to do the person in the back.
Hi.
Hi.
So, I'm a comedian. So is she. And I was talking with my other friend that's also a comedian the other day. And I love you guys' poetry. And I feel like I do the same thing. Like, I'm not afraid to talk about really anything. But then I was talking with my friend and we were saying, like, we're talking about certain subjects. She was like, I don't talk about my baby daddy on stage because it's not funny yet. Right? And I was like, I don't talk about my old job anymore. I don't talk about my old job on stage yet because it's not funny yet. Like, I haven't gotten to the place where I can pull those things out of my experience and make them funny. But I talk about literally everything. And I was wondering do you ever find yourself in that place, like, creatively, where you're like, there is something there, but I can't, like, say it yet. And then when do you know when you're done? Or I guess my question is, like, are there things where you just can't do? Like, that you just can't talk about?
So 2 years ago in 2017, when I released Corazon, I didn't know I was pregnant. And then about a month after, I had a miscarriage. And so the whole time after my book release, which was supposed to be the happiest time of my life, I was faced with the decision of whether I was going to keep a child, what I was going to do, and then having the miscarriage and finding out that pregnancies are difficult. It was this whole thing, right? Mm. And then usually I write through things, but now, being someone whose work travels a lot further from herself than it was when I first began sharing my work, I was like, am I ready for people to know this about me? Like, me and the would-be father haven't even really talked about it. Like, it was just a lot. The relationship was strained, and it was just a lot, right? Like, and how do I write about this and be responsible to myself? Because I don't know what's going to happen if I'm sitting on stage reading a poem about how I can't be a mom. Like, it's too close. I don't know what I'm going to do. And so for the All of Corazon, I didn't talk about it. And I didn't address it until I wrote Tesoro, which is my second book. And at the release, I did the poem. And I remember thinking afterwards, I wasn't ready to share that with an audience. Because it changed, like, it didn't ruin the night for me, but it, like, in that moment, it took me so much reading other poems. I was still trying to go back to myself, that I learned that if I'm not ready, it's okay. It's totally fine. And some things don't need to be talked about, and you're not being dishonest. Like, who the fuck deserves to know that I had a fucking miscarriage? Nobody else other than me and the father. And like, and I love y'all, but I don't owe you that information, you know? And so it was a hard lesson to learn, but I've moved on. Like, now coming forward, like, there's things sometimes where I'm like, oh, it's not time yet to tell that story, or I can't do that responsibly right now, because either I don't know if I'm going to be okay if I do, or it's going to affect other people that I don't know if they're going to be okay if I share this story about them. And I've had to learn the hard way, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question. Like, I mean, all these questions are a great question, but I think about that one a lot. And so, like, 2 years ago for me, right, had the first in what ended up being like a series of psychotic breaks, whimsical, fun, mental health stuff. No, it was terrible. And like, found out I'm bipolar 1 and all this stuff. And like, I mean, it's just still not funny. Like, I wrote a book about it. Like, The Blind Pig is a lot about someone losing their mind and grip on reality and everything. And there are like elements of it that I find humorous, that I'm like, oh my God, this bitch, like, me as this bitch is wild and mentally ill and being wild, and like, Christ. And sometimes I have to laugh about it, because it's like, there's nothing else to be done about it. You know, that's where the laughter is the curative, is the comedy, all that shit. But there's some parts of it that I'm like, yeah, nah, that ain't, I'm into the grave with that one. That's okay. And it's really all right, because you need these boundaries to be a sane person, right? Like, you need the boundary of like, I will not share this so I can go home and make food and take a shower and watch Mad Men again for the 19th time. Like, I need to not say it so I can be myself. And I think that's totally fair.
And also, to be transparent, both Aziza and I come from slam, right?
Yeah.
Where in slam, I'm not going to generalize the whole slam community. But a lot of times you find yourself wanting to write about the most shocking things in your life because it'll shock the judges into giving you higher scores and all, like, you know, and like you're trying to move 5 random people as much as you can. So you try to think of what the most moving things possible.
Yeah.
And so you're like unearthing like all these, oh, I could write about the time that this guy came up to me with a gun, you know, like, and then you're like, why are you doing that to yourself?
Yeah.
And so taking a step back and looking at having done 3 books and looking at what the larger stories are, you want to tell, you realize that sometimes more of the story is the little stories in between, right? Like the small moments, like the bus ride. It wasn't the thing that happened. It was the bus ride to the thing that happens that makes it more interesting. It was all these things. So we don't need to go around like telling everybody our deepest, darkest secrets. Sometimes we can tell the things around it and stuff. And I know that in comedy, it's also the same, right? Like when you're trying to tell stories, we're all telling stories about what people are going to connect with the most. Yeah. And usually pain is something that people go to really quickly, right? Because we all hurt, like heartbreak. Y'all love heartbreak poems. But sometimes that's not, you can't go up there and laugh about your ancient boyfriend because you're still going to go home and call him. And
no, you can do it.
I mean, you know.
Or maybe you have to laugh because you know you're gonna call him. Like,
yeah,
you know, it's
tricky. You gotta laugh because you know you're gonna call.
Every time I do a new book, I'm like, yeah, me and him broke, and then the next book, well.
So what happened was
when I wrote this one, I thought it was over, but it wasn't. But when I wrote this one, I thought it was over, but it wasn't. But now it's really, and it's not.
And that's when you get to say fun shit like, you know, life isn't linear. It's all like cyclical. Yeah.
You know, just because someone can't love you how you want them to love you doesn't make them a bad person.
Yeah.
And I'm like, bitch, he hasn't been loving you.
Yeah.
That's okay. Sorry, we went off on a tangent. Next question.
All right, this is the last question of the night. If you have lingering questions, there is a signing afterward. Don't forget.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
I really see a lot of my Salvadorian life in you. And I just wanted to ask, we talked a lot about family, and I know you talk a lot about the past, but I was hoping you can talk about the future. And what do you wish your niece and nephew learn from your poems, and they take forward?
So do you have any nibblings?
I have a nephew, my wee nibbling. His name is Rory. He's very
How old?
sweet. He's 18 months. Oh. He's literally my favorite person.
Is he walking yet?
He's walking. He now brushes his own 6 teeth. It's very cute. It's a whole situation.
I miss when Henry couldn't walk because he couldn't run from me.
Yeah. Well, now they're just like away. Yeah, the people.
Come back to me.
Yeah.
So I have an 8-year-old niece named Saya, who Hermosa is dedicated to, and I have a 7. I'm like naming other kids that don't exist. I have a 3-year-old nephew, Henry, and they're my sister's kids, and I'm one of 3 sisters, and my sister's an extension of me. Blah blah blah. Like they're my kids, and it's hard, right? Like to raise kids, especially one of them is half white. If you look at my Instagram, you realize which one it is. It's the boy. So I'm like, you got patriarchy and whiteness trying to claim you. We really have to try hard with you. But like, I just hope that just through their seeing me soar, they never fear to jump. You know, like my niece went to my book release and she sat in the front row. Maybe they didn't know what was happening part of the time, but she knows that she wants to come back to the next one because she got recognized by people and they were taking pictures of her. But like now, and she tells people that she has a famous tia. And so like she knows that the world to live in, that a fat woman gets to do all the things that I get to do. I didn't have that growing up, and it makes me so excited that my niece and nephew get to see themselves so represented in this world. Oh, it makes me even want to cry. Because, like, I mean, people like us, right? Like, we never got to... When did we ever go somewhere and see someone that looks like us?
It was rare.
Yeah.
I mean, even, yeah. it was just rare. And then when you did, you went like, oh my God, and
Right.
you didn't let go.
Yeah. Like I found Sandra Cisneros and I was building churches for her, you know?
Yeah. Who did I find? I feel like I found, you know, weirdly enough, not weird at all, but like I remember finding Frida Kahlo and just being like, a shorty like me a little bit, like kind of gay a little bit, like kind of trying to do this art thing, like hairy, you know, like I was very perturbed.
Yeah. And it's so exciting to know that we live in a world where people could, like, all you have to do is go online to find a reflection of you somewhere. And I just hope that I don't want to give them the burden of my dreams for them. I want them to do whatever it is that they want to do. I just want them to be good people, well-rounded people. And I want Saya to be a badass little girl. And I want Henry to be a kind man if he goes and decides he's a man. Yeah. But, you know, and I want them to be able to just do whatever the fuck they want to do.
Yeah, man.
And minimal trauma, too.
Yeah. If we could take that to the minimumist level possible.
Yeah.
And just let them just be like, when I think of my nephew, I think just like black boy joy, like black boy free, like, you know, if he chooses to be a boy right now, he seems to be choosing heavily toward things that are presenting that way. And to have, like, I was scared as fuck to have like a little black boy in the world, like that terrified me, because people just kill them, and it's just like another day, you know, as we all know. And so it's this hard line of wanting to just like shelter them from everything forever, but then knowing that like the reason that we get to be here and do shit like this is that we had to hit some things, and some things had to hit us. And like, I think for my little nibbling, what I want is like, I just pray the things that hit you don't completely take you out, but that you get to like incorporate how you want them to live in you and do your thing.
That's so beautiful. And Julia Alvarez said to Sandra Cisneros recently, she said, Sandra, the seeds we planted are starting to bloom. And that made me cry so hard, because I was just like, bitch, what? I'm a flower. But like, that's what it is, right?
That's
like
love. That's love.
Like our elders made us possible, and like just to think of what we're making possible, like just in 20 years I'll be sitting here and be like, the seeds,
just weeping.
Remember the seeds.
All right, we gotta like already make a date 20 years from now.
Yes, 20 years
come
from
back
now,
to
we're
the
gonna,
Strand and cry.
Yes, and then we're gonna cry, and y'all gonna come and bring your kids, okay?
Yep.
Thank you so much for having us.